Hey, this is Jordan with Fly Fishing University, and I just want to welcome you to this little mini masterclass on leader building. Leader building, not only is it important to understand the construction and some of the intricacies of leaders and tippets, but it's downright fun to make your own leaders sometimes. On top of this, it's going to play a huge part in the success that you're going to have on the water, because this is where so many anglers miss the mark. So this little mini class is going to give you a huge amount of value when it comes to making your own leaders, or really just understanding leaders and tippets and how they work to a greater degree. Just before we get started, I'm going to invite you right below this video to join us in Fly Fishing University before we shut down our enrollments. It's been an awesome experience. We've had so many great people come through and join this program from Australia, Europe, across the United States, and Canada. We're shutting down our enrollments in a couple days. I don't know when we're gonna open them again, but I'm very, very excited about it. So this is your invite. We just have a couple days left before we're closing down, and let's get started on the leader building mini masterclass. Now, really quick, just before we get started, okay, I understand most of you are gonna know this, but there are some that might not, and that's totally okay. You're gonna hear me talk about leader and tippet in this short little course, okay? So what I mean when I'm talking about leader, the leader is typically the connection between the fly line, okay? It's the first connection after the fly line. So a lot of times when we're talking leaders, we're talking tapered leaders that are built most of the time in the factory, but there are a lot of ways, and I'm going to teach you in this course how to build your own tapered leaders. Okay, so tippet comes on a spool, and it is one level diameter the whole way through. Okay, so this says 4x 6-pound tippet. That means that this spool is loaded with tippet and nothing else. There's nothing else on here. There's no taper to it. It's just 30 meters of the exact same thing, whereas this actually has different diameters tapering down, and that's how they create them in the factory. So I'm going to go through, tapered leaders, level leaders, all this stuff, but just understand when I'm talking about leader, typically the first thing coming off the fly line. When I talk about tippet, it's what we're going to be adding to the leader. Now, there's really only 5 things that are gonna go very wrong when it comes to the construction of our leader, right? Or the use of our tippet. So the first one is that the leader or tippet is too heavy or it's too light. When it's too heavy and fish can see it, it becomes very, very ultra visible to them, then that can be a major deterrent. Okay, so that can mean that it's just too visible, they can see it too well, they can see your connections too well, and it's gonna put them off, okay? This is very common with really species that are very spooky or in really clear water. Now, the tippet is too light means that it's just not enough for the species or size of fish that you're targeting, and they're breaking it all the time, right? It's like they're breaking it as soon as they grab the fly, or they're breaking it as soon as you start fighting them. That means you need to go to a heavier tippet, right? So again, these are very common and easily adjustable. Now, the second one is that the leader is too short or it's too long. Now, this would be a topic for another day, obviously, but it's pretty easy to understand that when the leader's too short means it's too close to the fly line. That can spook fish really easily, especially fish that are seeing a lot of flies, or fish that are, fish that are really spooky, or fish that are in clear water. Okay, the idea that the leader's too long means that it's just, you can't get that nice turnover where the fly is landing, where the fly is the last thing to land, and it looks all nice. When the leader's too long, can be a little bit challenging to cast. Now, the third one is that the leader's improperly tapered. I'm going to get into this in the next part of this lesson, but it's important to understand how the taper of a leader should look. Okay, so we're going to talk about this in the next segment of this video. The next one is that the leader is the wrong material. So we're basically looking at either 2 materials, fluorocarbon or monofilament. Okay, monofilament standard fishing line it's a little bit more buoyant than, it's a little bit more neutral buoyancy than fluorocarbon, but fluorocarbon sinks a little bit more and it's less visible. So it's important to understand when you're going to be using either one of these, okay? So monofilament, for example, it's not going to sink on you, so it's nice to use for dry flies, flies that you're fishing on the surface, whereas fluorocarbon sinks really well and it's a little bit harder to see, so it's nice when you're fishing subsurface presentations. There's other things like abrasion resistance, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into that right now. Now the last one is that the leader has faulty connections or it uses the wrong knots. So in the next part of this video, I'm going to show you what knots are going to go into what part of the leader. But it's really important to know that the wrong knots or the right knots that are tied improperly, big no-no, okay? One thing I didn't put on here, but if you ever see a wind knot, they call them wind knots. They don't call them angler error knots. A wind knot is what's called a casting knot sometimes, where basically the leader or the fly, as you're casting, okay, it's gonna get wrapped around itself like this, and the leader's gonna go through this little loop and it's gonna pull itself down there. They're hard to notice on the leader sometimes, but it's important to note that they really weaken they really weaken the strength of that leader or tippet material that you're using, and they should be taken out immediately. So anyways, these are just a few things that can go wrong with the leader construction process, and I know we've probably all experienced them to some point, and if you haven't, then hopefully this is going to save you from going through that. Now, the next part, I'm going to show you all about tapered leaders, and I'm also going to show you how to make your own tapered leaders, which is super, super fun. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to show you how to build a tapered leader from scratch, and this is super fun. I don't do this anymore when I'm trout fishing for the most part. I do this if I'm going on like a saltwater trip or something. I really love building my own leaders. So first I'm going to show you how to make a tapered leader. In the next portion of this, I'm going to show you how to make a level leader, but tapered leaders are really nice, okay? Tapered leaders, they create a transition from the fly line down to the fly, okay? You can imagine how hard it would be to get that really, really thin tippet material that you're using to tie onto the end of your fly. If you had like 12 feet of it or even 10 feet of it, it's too drastic of a difference between the thick fly line right down to that really, really thin stuff. It's not going to lay out properly, what they call turning over. It's not going to turn the fly over properly, okay? So this is going to show you how to build a tapered leader from scratch. Now, typically what you're going to see is you're going to see one of these two formulas, okay? So 50, 30, 20 or 60, 20, 20. What do I mean by this? Typically is what you're going to see is either 50% of the leader is the butt section, 30% of the leader is the midsection, and 20% of the leader is the tip or the tippet section. Or, like I've got here, you're going to see 60% of the leader is the butt section, 20% of the leader is the midsection, 20% of the leader is the tip section. I kind of prefer this one a little bit. I think that it gets a little bit cleaner turnover. So basically, the reason that we have these three sections here, so the butt section, what this is designed to do is to create that energy transfer from the fly line down to the thin tippet material that you're using to tie your fly onto. It's just too big of a jump from the thickness of the fly line all the way down to this thin stuff. We've got to have something in between. So basically that butt section is going to power that leader to turn over, especially with a small fly that doesn't weigh anything. Okay, now this midsection is just kind of acting as a buffer in between this really thick stuff and the really thin stuff. It's really difficult to tie very thin tippet to really thick tippet, so what we're doing is we're tapering down in the poundage, in the diameter, in the breaking strength of the tippets or leader materials that we're using to build this leader here. Okay, so the first section here is a piece of 30-pound test. Okay, this is a piece of 30-pound test. Usually this is going to be about, if I'm building a 10-foot leader, which is what I like for dry fly fishing, let's say, typically I'm going to be using about a 4-foot piece of 30-pound test, okay? 30-pound test is very thick, so it's really going to help aid the turnover of that fly, especially fishing small flies. Okay, I'm going to use here, anytime I put these two slashes, that's a knot. But the nice thing is, I'm always going to be using one of two knots here, a blood knot or a double surgeon's knot. Okay, so this is always going to be either a blood knot or a double surgeon's knot to connect these two. I like a blood knot because they're pretty, they look nice. I love the way they look when they sit down properly. Okay, so I'm gonna have about 4 feet of this 30-pound test here. Okay, 30-pound test. I'm gonna transition into a couple feet of 20-pound test. Okay, so usually if I have 4 feet of this, I'm gonna have about 2 feet of this. That's gonna make up 6 feet. That's my 60% of the butt section of this tapered leader. Next, I'm going to throw in my blood knot here or my double surgeon's knot, whichever you prefer tying. I haven't found one to be stronger or better than the other. They just have their different applications. Surgeon's knot's maybe a little bit faster, easier to tie. Blood knot is such a beautiful knot for me. So then I'm going to taper down from 20 pound to 12 pound. Okay. Now this is about as big of a jump as I'm going to make when I'm tapering down these leaders. You can also go like 20 pound to 15 pound to 10 pound to 8 pound to 6 pound, let's say, but we're just going to use this for an example. Okay, so I'm going to taper from my 20 pound down into, this is the midsection here, this is kind of the buffer. Okay, the 12 pound piece is going to attach to the 20 pound piece. I'm going to have, and these are all about 1 foot in length, so I'm about 4 feet, 2 feet, 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, so that is that is my 60%, and then my 20%, and then my 20%. Okay, so I'm gonna go from my 30 to my 20 to my 12 down to my 8-pound test. Okay, 8-pound test tapering down to 6-pound test, 6-pound tapering down to, let's just say we're gonna end this one in 5 pound. That's where I'm gonna tie my fly onto. So this is really, really fun because you get this great sense of accomplishment when you make a nice leader for yourself, but it's also important because it lets you understand what leader, what of these percentages casts best for you. Okay, for me, this is kind of my golden leader for dry fly fishing. It's hard to beat this. Learned this over 10 years ago, and especially before I had kids, I'd build my own leaders all the time, but now time has become a bit more of an asset, a bit more valuable. So I buy a lot of my tapered leaders now, but like I said, from time to time, I like to build my own tapered leaders. So again, 30 to 20 to 12 to 8 to 6 to 5, following the 60, 20, 20 percentage formula. Okay, and this is so nice because these tapered leaders let you fish a longer leader. Okay, they let you fish a much longer leader. You couldn't just tie 10 feet of 5-pound test on the end of your fly line. If you're fishing a small fly that doesn't weigh very much, it'd be very, very hard to turn it over. So I hope that this helps you. And now let's look at how we tie and when we fish a level leader versus a tapered leader. Okay, so now let's look at fishing and tying a level leader. When I say a level leader, typically what this is 1, maximum 2 different pieces of tippet. Okay, a lot of times it's just 1. Most of the time, you know, if I'm fishing a sink tip line or a sinking line, I'm usually just going to be running like 4 feet of, say, 10-pound test or 4 feet of 8-pound test. You can put a little bit of a breaker in here, especially if you're going to break your leader at any point. You want to have a little bit, maybe a bit thinner tippet at the bottom. But why do we use this? Where is this important? And why would we use this over a tapered leader? Well, it's a great question. And the first thing is that typically this is not going to be used on dry lines with a dry fly setup. Okay, again, we want that butt section to help turn that small dry fly over. This is going to be used, it's nice because this is not going to hinder the way that the fly sinks. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick example of just the difference in the way that a level leader will sink and the way that a tapered leader will sink. Okay, so typically a tapered leader, because you have that thicker leader at the top, a lot of times it's going to kind of sink like that, okay? This top section is going to be tougher to sink than the really thin stuff at the end. The nice thing about those level leaders is that they're going to go straight down, right? They're going to sink way better than a tapered leader is going to. So when are we going to use this? Typically, this is going to be in a sunk fly, so a wet line, wet fly. A lot of the time, it's when we don't care as much, like getting everything to turn over is not much of an issue because let's say you have a heavier fly on the end, you're not worried about the presentation, right? All you're trying to do is get your stuff in the water. And so we don't need that butt section because we're fishing, usually with a level leader, we're fishing a shorter piece of tippet, okay? We're fishing a shorter leader than we are fishing with the tapered leader, okay? So usually, again, that's gonna be kind of less than like 9 feet, for example. Let's just say I'm steelhead fishing, okay? I never really use tapered leaders, steelhead fishing if I'm fishing subsurface, right? Because I just want that nice, clean, uniform sink. I don't need a tapered leader on there. It can actually hinder your effectiveness of your sunk fly presentation sometimes. So basically, all this is a perfection loop up here, okay? This example, I have 10 pound down to 8 pound. This could just be a straight piece of 10 pound, and this could just be a straight piece of 8 pound. The only reason that I put this little breaker here is that if I'm gonna hang up on a stick or a tree or a log or a rock or something on the bottom, I want to be able to break my leader if I have to and not lose the whole thing or risk breaking this top section. If I'm gonna break anywhere, it's gonna be right here or my connection to the fly, whichever one is stronger. Okay, so now one important thing to note when you're fishing these level leaders, because a lot of times it's just a one long piece of say like 6 pound or 8 pound or 10 pound. One thing that's important to note is that sometimes you're gonna have like a little bumper here that's gonna be a thicker piece of like monofilament, for example, that'll connect your level leader up to your fly line. The only tricky thing with these level leaders, you don't wanna be attaching that really thin line directly to the fly line because it can cut into the core, or cut into the coating, sorry. So sometimes I'll put like a little piece of like 12 or 15 pound test. I'll just have it right here between the leader and the fly line. But anyways, topic for another day. So again, these level leaders are so nice when you're fishing a sunk fly, sinking line or a sink tip, you know, wet fly presentation. A lot of times, again, they're shorter. They're much shorter than our tapered leader counterparts are. And typically, again, right in the middle, you're either gonna use a double surgeons or a blood knot. Okay, so tapered leader, more conducive for like floating line, dry fly, small fly presentation. Level leader, awesome when you're fishing subsurface and the turnover, getting everything to turn over because typically this is so short, not really much of an issue. So I know that this has been short, but at least I hope that this helps you. It's still almost, you know, winter-ish a little bit where I live, so we're still spending a bit of time inside, and so building leaders can be a fun way to pass the time. Let's say you're you know, sitting in your hotel room the night before you go fishing and you got everything else set up. It's fun to sit down and build a few leaders sometimes. So anyways, I know this has been short. I just wanted to give this to you for free. It'll be up for the next day or two until we close down our enrollments into our Fly Fishing University program. So I just want to say thanks, and I hope that this is valuable. Again, I would be honored to have you as a founding member of our Fly Fishing University coaching program. Right now we have a lifetime option, which we're never going to have a lifetime option ever again. So going forward, whenever we open up again, it's going to be on either on a monthly or annual subscription basis. But right now you can sign up once, sign up for life. I'll give you access to some of the greatest minds, some of the best, you know, leading people in the fly fishing industry to help teach you and increase your fly fishing skill set. So you can click the button down below. You can get all the information you need there. If it's not for you, no pressure. Either way, I hope that this is of value to you, and best of luck on the water in your 2021 season. I hope to see you inside Fly Fishing University.